Okay. Thank you. Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the El Cajon City Council meeting. The meeting is called to order. I'd like to ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Kendrick is absent. All others present.
Would you all stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing afterwards for a brief moment of silence? Thank you. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the August 13th, 2024 meeting and the agenda of the September 10th, 2024 meeting in accordance with state law, city council, and housing authority policy. We have a proclamation for National Preparedness Month, and Chief Coe will come up and accept this proclamation. And whilst Chief's coming up, I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation. Whereas National Preparedness Month creates an opportunity for every resident of the city of El Cajon to prepare their homes, businesses, and communities for any type of emergency. And whereas California residents have previously experienced the effects of various disasters, including severe winter storms, earthquakes, and devastating wildland fires, resulting in loss of life and damage costing millions of dollars. The aftermath of the 2003 and 2007 firestorms in San Diego County and more recent wildfires across the state demonstrated the necessity for careful and thorough emergency planning and preparedness among individuals, communities, and agencies locally. And whereas the recent and unprecedented winter storms of 2024 brought awareness to the dangers which heavy rain, wind, and flooding can cause across the region, and whereas the loss of life and damage to property can be reduced if appropriate emergency preparedness measures are taken before, during, and after a major emergency, and whereas National Preparedness Month is observed in September, and all citizens of the city of El Cajon are encouraged to participate in citizen preparedness activities and asked to review the READY campaign's website at ready.gov or heartlandfire.org and become more prepared. Now, therefore, I, Bill Wells, Mayor of the City of El Cajon, together with the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2024 as National Preparedness Month. And be it further proclaimed that the Mayor and the City Council of the City of El Cajon urge all citizens and businesses to develop their own emergency preparedness plan and work together towards creating a more prepared community. Signed this 10th day of September 2024. Thank you, Chief Coe.
Thank you, Mayor Wells, members of City Council, city staff. It's an honor, and I just want to say thank you for continued support for emergency preparedness. And I also do want to introduce you, for many of you probably already know, our emergency preparedness coordinator, Andy McKellar. It's a one-man show, and he's a force to be reckoned with in keeping us prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Andy, did you want to say a few words? Or?
Thank you, Mayor. I think what you said, just to reiterate what you said, everybody's got to be prepared on their own. That's going to be the biggest key in a really big disaster. You need to be ready for yourself, to take care of yourself and your family and your neighbors. That's the best way to be prepared.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, Michelle has a comment.
Thank you for putting this all together and bringing it to our attention. I do have a question. For those of us who have animals on our property, I know this may seem silly, but how do we get stickers to put on our doors or our windows that say, hey, we've got animals inside, so that if something were to happen and we're not home, how, that someone, if they're coming on our property, that, hey, we've got animals inside and to look for them?
I'm not sure that, well, I know that we don't have such a program within the city. You may want to look to County Animal Services.
Okay.
They are actually, by law, the ones in charge of sheltering animals in a large disaster. Okay. So they may have such a program ready to go.
Perfect. I had no idea where to even begin to start looking. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll gladly look into it and we'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Before we go on to consent items, I notice we have a lot of guests today. I assume that they're from at least one of the local high schools. Where are you guys from? That group's Valhalla. How about this one over here? Everybody's. So why is Valhalla so civic minded? You're forced to come here? Yeah. No, I appreciate you coming. Thanks very much. We're now consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any of the consent items?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull consent item number 7.
Number 7. Okay.
I got a call about this. May I? Is that okay?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a call about this from the public, and I thought it'd be helpful for maybe our city manager to give some context as to, our decision in 2021 in July of spending some more money, some of our ARPA money on the public works vehicles and public safety, and why we chose to do that because there's a deadline.
That's exactly. There is a deadline, and this is something that we can easily do. The other wonderful thing about this is it actually frees up general fund money into the future that we would have used to spend to purchase these vehicles. It also allows us to buy the minimum number of e-vehicles that we're required to purchase, so it gives us an ability to do that with money that's not general fund money.
And I remember during our previous discussions there was some process that if we're going to contract with someone, they had to be vetted through a process to be eligible for us to spend money. And, we could be ambitious in completing other projects, but the vetting process might take longer. And so this is a good way to be able to spend the money without using it. Is that right? Am I on there?
That's correct. In order to be a contractor or a vendor with federal, that's going to receive federal money, such as ARPA money, there's a lot of hoops that they have to jump through. Not everyone qualifies. It's some extra procurement steps that take at least a month to complete. So this allows us to get that done right away.
Okay, that was all the questions I had. Like I said, I got a call from this just before this meeting, and they were asking about it, so I felt it was good to just add some context to it. So thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Graham, for the public's sake, can you explain ARPA money?
Yes, ARPA money is one-time money that the federal government used to infuse funds into the economy to help after COVID. And so there are some restricted uses for those monies, and the City Council has until the end of this calendar year to actually allocate everything. It doesn't have to be spent, but it has to be allocated with contracts in place. So between now and December, we're really running out of time. So we think that there's going to be a little bit of extra money left over. We have some other plans to bring forward to the council if that happens, and it'll be money that'll be easy to be spent, that will make an impact on our community, and or will have return on its investment.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Did you have any consent items you wanted to pull, or your staff?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll make a first off, Angela, do we have speaker cards for consent items?
No speaker card, sir.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the remaining of the consent items unless Councilman Goebel had something to say.
I did. I have a question also on item 7.
Oh, okay.
I think the public would probably ask, are we retiring any of these vehicles early and not getting the full value out of them before we buy new ones? It looks like on the list, most of these vehicles are at least 10 to 20 years old. What could you tell the public? Are we retiring vehicles early?
That's a great question. No, we're not retiring vehicles early. I think during COVID, we were unsure of what our budget condition was going to look like, so we actually slowed down our vehicle replacement schedule. So this is actually catching us back up.
Okay, that's a good question. And also the public may not know that we have a mandate that a certain percentage of any new vehicle that we buy has to be an electric vehicle. What's that percentage, and are we buying the minimum that we need to, or?
We are purchasing the minimum. Right now, I believe it's for every new vehicle that we're purchasing, half of them have to be electric vehicles. And I think by 2026, 28, 27, 100% of new vehicles or replacement vehicles have to be e-vehicles for us, for our fleet.
So one of the advantages for the public funds is by purchasing these vehicles now, we escape that 100% mandate, and we can use some of these, they're either gas or diesel, for the next 10 years or so and help stretch out that money a little bit longer. That makes sense. I like when things make sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, I'd like to make a motion then to approve the rest of the consent items.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Mr. Mayor, we also, if we can go back and do changes to the agenda, we actually do have a change to the agenda finally. We rarely do.
Oh, yeah, please. What is it?
Mayor and Council, we're going to continue item 22, the first reading of an ordinance that's dealing with the tobacco license retailing ordinance. We have a couple code sections in there that need to be changed. We are changing the wrong, well, adding the wrong one. So we'll bring it back next meeting. It should be clean and ready to go.
So item 22. Okay. We're now at consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any of the consent?
We already did consent, Mr. Mayor.
We just did that again.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
You still feel strongly about pulling the one you did? Because you change your mind sometimes.
Not anymore. I don't feel confident
This is
at all.
all your fault. I'm embarrassed. Okay. Now we're at public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council Housing Authority successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments related to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions, and an item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, do we have any speaker cards for public comment?
We do, sir. We have 3 of them.
All right, let's do that.
The first one is Brenda Hammond.
Hey, Brenda, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So, as usual, I had something all ready to say, but I got changed a little bit today. But first of all, I wanted you to know that I went to see the little houses.
Yeah.
And I didn't go inside because, it was locked and everything. But I saw the outside, and I like it. I like how it's clean. It's
Very nice.
It looks good. So I wanted to say that at our meeting in Lemon Grove, but it was canceled last week, so I didn't get to. But I want to let people know it's not what they think it is. It's not a drop-in. It's not, anyway. So that was a good thing. And second, I wish the state would get off of local law enforcement for sharing information. I know that you have a closed session today, and you can't comment on this. But, we had 2 deaths in Lemon Grove over the weekend, and the way they found them was the license plate, the way they found the shooter. So I don't understand why the state has to stick their nose into stuff that law enforcement needs to do. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda.
Next speaker is John Bosch.
Mr. Bosch, welcome.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, council members. Your opening statement, you said about natural disasters, loss of life. It's perfect for what I want to talk about. Downtown, you have a building that is unsafe I already talked to code enforcement and Kevin Johnson from Heartland Fire. They all came out, they took pictures of it. I don't know if y'all are aware of it. People are in there working to refurbish the inside of the building. But you got to work on the outside before you can fix the inside. The bricks, I got pictures if you want to see them. The bricks are cracked right through from the roof to the foundation in several parts of that wall. It's attached to the acupuncture place right across the street, 245 East Main. And it's for sale. So why isn't that building condemned, or at least where they have to fix the outside of it before they can even put it up for sale? I'm just thinking that the city would be liable if a natural disaster like an earthquake would knock the building down and people were around there.
Let me ask, do you know anything about this, Graham?
I don't know anything about this. It sounds like staff's aware of it and is on it, inspecting it. I don't know the situation. I'll speculate, though, that if it were being inhabited, there is some potential for us to condemn. But if a building's not being inhabited and being worked on, there's no reason to condemn. In fact, the only way to fix it is by having people in it to fix it. So it sounds like that's what's happening, but I can get the council some more information.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's a brick wall on the outside. You don't fix the inside until you fix the foundation.
Are you connected to this building in some way?
I am.
How are you connected to it, sir?
I am flabbergasted that you would allow somebody to sell the building in an unsafe condition.
Our staff's going to look at it. I'm just curious. Do you own the building? Or
No. I know the guy that does own the building, no.
Okay. All right, well, we'll take a look at it. Thank you for
And I don't understand why he wouldn't know something about it. I mean, they came out, they took pictures. The city manager should know something about it.
I'm sure he'll know very soon.
Well, I sure hope so. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks for coming.
Last speaker is Bobby T.
Hey, bye.
Council, staff, girls, how's it going? I'm here to ask you guys to change the ordinance or the verbiage on the super block, predominantly where the promenade is. When I walked into the free show Friday night, I got surrounded by dog owners, even some non-dog owners. Evidently, they read something that night that said, "No dogs allowed, get out." So I guess they gave everyone a grace period that night to, we won't enforce this tonight. Now, that sign says no dogs allowed. That sign's been there over 20 years. 20 years ago, America still was a dog-oriented country. We're more so even now. We think that sign's outdated and it should be brought up to date. There were more dog owners. Before I hit that show that night, I hit all three restaurants in the neighborhood. Dogs were in there, had a little something to eat, non-alcoholic beer for me. And then I went to the show, and then that's where everybody heard this announcement. And so it got people fired up. They know I come down here on Tuesdays, and they go, "You get down there and you say something or do something." So I need to report to these people on Friday night. So I'm here, and this doesn't personally offend me. My dog is a service dog. He's all credentialed. But it does bother me that all of a sudden this isn't enforced for 20 years or longer. Now all of a sudden it is. I heard somebody over here say something about, for item 22, code enforcement to the ordinance. Is that the road I got to go down? See, I don't know the road to go down. I'm bringing it up to see.
A little premature. Let's figure out what the problem is first.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer some things. First of all, I'm a little concerned that Bobby has listening devices in our offices because we've been talking about this very issue this entire week. So
yeah, don't mess with Bobby.
Thanks for making me laugh because I'm a little nervous.
All right. So this ordinance went into effect in 1997, and we're not going to have a whole dialogue. We actually, the assistant city manager and I talked about putting this on the agenda just to get an understanding if this is something the council wants to reconsider or think about and give us some direction from a policy perspective. So we're planning on doing that in the next couple meetings. So you'll be having an opportunity to have a broader discussion about this.
There you go.
So meanwhile, it's okay to bring the dogs down there, or what? Or not? Or you can't answer that question? Can't answer that question.
It's not allowed.
Okay. So this is going to be brought up, and you guys are going to look at changing the ordinance, maybe.
We're going to discuss it.
Okay.
But I appreciate, and when we do, this is a great time for people to come to City Council when they feel strongly about an issue. Come down and let us know how you feel. Public opinion means a lot.
If they come, they might bring their dogs. You sure you want that here? I mean, mine's a little bit antsy right now. That's why I haven't brought my new dog down here as often as my old one. So.
This is like
but
the
I know
OK
you guys
Corral.
are all dog owners too. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I love dogs. So,
yeah.
But have them come down and tell us how you feel about it all.
Okay.
I'm sure
meanwhile, take a good look at this, okay?
I'm sure we can.
They're law-abiding citizens down there, and they don't want to break the law either.
I don't know about you all, but this is the first I've heard of it. So
This is the first I've heard of it too, and I think you can go back to your friends and let them know that we're all dog lovers on this council. So much so that we tried breaking the record for the most dogs watching a movie.
Right. I was there.
Yeah,
So
you were there. Yeah, so
yes.
I don't know of any city in Southern California that tried to break that record. So
Right.
yeah, we all love dogs here. So.
if it had been a better movie, I think they would have come.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Bobby. That's it?
No other speakers,
One more,
sir.
okay. Who's the last one? I thought you said there was one more
Oh, no,
public
no
comment.
other speakers, sir.
Oh, okay. All right, then. Thank you. So there are no written communications on today's agenda. We have one public hearing on today's agenda. Item 11 is to consider a request to vacate a utility easement. Staff will tell us all about this.
Is it okay to grab the HDMI? Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Mario Sanchez, City Engineer of Engineering Services, and this item is a consideration to vacate an existing city utility easement at 330-340 North First Street. And the location of this lot is south of First Street, south of East Madison Avenue at 330, 340. And it's an existing apartment complex. And they're known as the Palm Terrace Apartments, and that's where the easement is located. And back in 1981, the City Council approved the vacation of a proposed alleyway on the west side of the property adjacent to the high school there, and reserved that area on this particular lot for utility easement. The owner of the property reached out to the city and requested us to vacate the easement, the existing utility easement, in order to consolidate his parcels there. There's two existing parcels into one parcel. And with that, that would allow him to take full control over his property. And I failed to mention the existing easement is about 24 feet wide and 135 feet along the length of the lot.
And this is just a topographic survey of the location when they hired a surveyor to map out where the easement lies, and it's on the west side of the property. And within the process of vacating easements, the city has to follow a process. And we normally contact all the utility owners and to determine if there's an existing need at this easement. And we reached out to all affected utility owners, and we had nobody responded back that there's any utilities within this area or future activities. So this is just a photo of the actual lot on the west side of the property. It's just used as a parking lot for that apartment building. So in accordance with the Public Streets, Highways, and Service Easements Code, Section 8300, staff was recommending that the request for this vacation of the easement be approved. We also further emphasized the proposed vacation is consistent with the city's general plan, and there's no fiscal impacts to the city of this action. So staff is recommending that the City Council adopts the next resolution in order to open the public hearing and receive testimony, close the public hearing, and adopt the next resolution in order to approve the summary vacation of the existing utility easement at 330-340 North 1st Street, established by Council Resolution number 161-81, dated April 14th, 1981. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Any questions for Mario? All right, thanks, Mario. We're good. I'm going to open up a public hearing and ask Angela if we have any speaker cards.
We have no card, sir.
Then I'll make a motion to close the public hearing. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Seems like a pretty straightforward housekeeping issue. Somebody like to make a motion?
Move adoption.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
We have 5 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 12 is a report on city infrastructure and deferred maintenance. I'd like to ask our staff to tell us all about this. Hi, Clay.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council. My name is Clay Shane. I'm the Director of Finance for the City of El Cajon. I'm here today to present a report on the city's infrastructure and deferred maintenance. Specifically, this report had the stated objective of analyzing the city's historical investment in capital assets and to evaluate whether current spending is sufficient to maintain the city's asset base. This is a very common analysis of financial statements in the business world where you consider a corporation's depreciation against their current investment in capital assets as an indication of whether they're building their infrastructure base or whether it's diminishing. To guide the city's policies and practices related to capital assets, we follow the City Council Policy E6 for capital asset management. This does a couple of things for us. First, it defines the asset classes and how the city will categorize these assets. In this report, we don't address every single asset. Some of them, it just didn't make sense to do so. Land, for example, land is kind of a permanent asset. It doesn't it's not consumed over time. Likewise, we didn't include things like easements because it's an either we have access or we don't have access. We don't use it up over time. In addition to that, this policy establishes the estimated useful lives for these assets. So the methodology we followed, first, we started with just a real simple annual depreciation and compared it to annual capital expenditure. And we found out that that rapidly was not going to suffice to answer that question. The city simply has too much diversification in its type of assets and too many funding sources that it created a rather complex web that was difficult to analyze. What we did, however, was to, by asset category, evaluate the percent that these asset classes on average were depreciated. Now, take you back to your business classes in college on depreciation. Depreciation is the systematic recognition of a capital asset over the period of benefit. So if we buy $1 million asset that's going to last for 10 years, we recognize $100,000 of expense each of those 10 years. So if we look at that asset about the halfway mark of its life, it'll have a book value of $500,000 because we've used half of it. In addition to that, we evaluated the average life of the asset class and compared that to the estimated useful life, just to kind of get a hold of how old the assets are. One of the unique things we did here, however, that you frequently won't do when discussing depreciation, most assets in regular use are fairly short-term assets, 5-year, 10-year, stuff like that. Some of the things that we keep track of have very, very long years. So comparing an asset that we bought 50, 60, 80 years ago against what it costs today is a little misleading. So we've adjusted all these for inflation to bring them all up to today's dollars, so we're comparing apples to apples. And from there, we consider the results and draw conclusions. So jumping in, I kind of group these asset classes together because there are some basic themes that sort of bring them together. The first that we looked at were buildings and improvements. This asset class has 145 records and approximately $205 million worth of assets at this using today's dollars. Collectively, that's about halfway through their collective useful lives, which is a good sign because if we're replacing more assets than we're using, then we're going to have a very young base. If we aren't doing that, then we would have a very old base. Being at the halfway mark means we're just straight right where we should be. However, as we looked at it and thought about what that meant, we very rapidly asked the question, does that matter at all? And I'll tell you why. A building, for example, has a 50-year useful life, but the roof wears out in 20 years. So at the end of the 20 years, it's only 40% through its useful life, but the roof leaks and needs to be replaced. Does that 60% mean anything if the roof leaks? The other thing that created a problem in this asset class, and I'd like to use the Fletcher Hills pool as an example, was the very first asset record for that facility was established when the facility was built in the 60s. Since then, it's been added to, renovated, rebuilt, so we have a total of 9 different records, with the most recent one being in 2017. So when you're looking at this whole pool by putting everything together, it's a little misleading. Does Fletcher Hills need attention or not? The pool might be in great shape. The roof might leak. It's kind of hard to tell. So I use this and dig into this detail, and I won't do this for all of them, I promise, because it really drives home the point that no matter what our accounting records say and how old these assets are, it's really going to come down to condition assessments of what these buildings are actually looking like and acting like. Do the roofs leak? Are the gym floors worn out? Things like that. Asset records are never going to give you that information. The next one, very similar situation, are our bridges. We have a grand total of 3 bridges in the city of El Cajon, or at least that we're responsible for. Total approximate value in today's dollars of $2 million. They are 72, 63, and 35% depreciated. And kind of here again, the same question, does age matter? If a bridge is on the brink of failure, if it's crumbling, falling apart, doesn't matter if it's new or old, it still needs to be replaced. Additionally, this group of assets has a fairly large risk component associated with them. Seismic activity may create an immediate need for repair or replacement of these assets, and it just simply doesn't matter how new they are at that stage. We'll talk more about risk later. On pavement, this is our largest single category. It had a total value of approximately $341 million in today's dollars. And this group is approximately 78% of the way through its estimated lives. So right off the bat, you intuitively want to say, these are old assets that we're just not investing enough in. But the dilemma is, with roads specifically, they have a 40-year estimated useful life. But if you take care of these roads, they'll last much longer than that. And if you don't maintain them, they're going to fall apart a lot quicker than that. So this is another example. In fact, all three of these are examples of the asset record, and the level of depreciation just isn't meaningful. And it's never going to take the place of going out and assessing the condition of these assets. The one nice thing about pavement is they're above ground, and we've got a lot of people driving on them and observing them. As they require attention, we have a very easy mechanism to collect feedback and know where the problems are. On this slide, our last group is sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. Total value of approximately $94 million, of which 84 are depreciated. I've kind of started referring to these as forever assets. They're made out of concrete, and frankly, the assignment of a useful life is almost an accounting function, only because without problems, these things are going to last forever. I mean, I have never seen a block's worth of sidewalk get replaced just because it was old. Condition assessment is a necessity in this class is all, but what's unique here is the question of, are we fully built out as a community or are we not? Do we have all of our neighborhoods curbed, guttered, sidewalked? And the asset records aren't going to tell us that. They're going to tell us what we have, not what we don't have. So this category, the focus really is potential new construction to get us, the city, to a level of curbs, sidewalks, and guttering as we want to be. Moving along, traffic control devices and streetlights kind of go together. They have a lot of similarities. Pretty straightforward on what the difference between the two are. Traffic control devices on average, or in total, have a value of $24 million and are 79% depreciated. The average age of a traffic control device in this category is 20.6 years, and the estimated useful life is 20 years for these assets. So they're actually older than their estimated useful life. Streetlights are in a similar condition. $20 million value in the category, 92% depreciated. Average life is 31 years in the category. Is estimated useful life is 20 years here too. This is kind of unique in why these records aren't meaningful. Is we very rarely, when a street light needs improvements, tear down the pole and replace a new pole. We usually just replace the guts, take out the light bulbs, replace them with LEDs, whatever the new technology is. The poles themselves, where the vast majority of the expense lies, still stand regardless of whatever upgrades there are. So in this case, we don't have full replacements. We have partial replacements and upgrades, and technology changes rapidly in these categories. Additionally, both of these categories begs the question, similar to curbs and gutters, is the city complete with all the traffic signals and street lights that we require? I know we still have neighborhoods that need street lights. Our asset records do not address those needs. Simply, strategy for these categories is fix what's broken and upgrade when it's worthwhile to do so. The stormwater system and the sewer system, I frequently combine them. Sometimes it's appropriate to do so, sometimes not. Storm system controls the runoff from rains. Pretty straightforward. $180 million worth of assets, 73% depreciated. Almost the exact same scenario as curbs and sidewalks. These are largely concrete structures that could live forever, basically. periodic assessments of the integrity of these systems is a necessity, obviously, but maybe more so is the planning work behind it. Do we have a sufficient system? Do we have any places that still require work and development, things like that? Additionally, there's the complication of regulation and risk associated with failures in these systems. The sewer system, on the other hand, total value is $219 million in today's dollars, 71.1% depreciated. So the system as a whole is aging. This, I want to contrast to pavement, it's all below ground. So we don't have a good mechanism on where the problems are. We do conduct regular assessments with the closed circuit television and stuff like that. But condition assessment inspection is critical for this category specifically. And the primary reason I say that is the risk associated. The cost of failure is extremely high, and basically the system hides from us. Some additional thoughts. Condition assessments and planning are critical to the discussion of capital assets. Without either, you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going. So the work that we already have in place is critical. In the report, we discuss a number of initiatives from improved software to keep track of our assets to planning exercises in various places of the city to help the planning side. Funding sources is also a very important component of this discussion. There are a number of these asset classes that are supported by restricted, dedicated revenues. The sewer system, for example. Our sewer system bill payers, the funding that they provide through their rates pay for those systems. Those monies cannot be used for anything else, so they are secure in funding. However, some of these asset classes, particularly in the building improvement categories, we'll use a rec center as an example. We're competing for general revenues in this case. So we are competing police officers versus rec centers in this scenario. Additionally, some of these categories have very high risk associated with them in terms of failure. Frankly, some assets we can afford to let it fail and then fix it if we need to. And some of them we just can't afford to sit back and wait for that to happen. We have to proactively monitor and measure and make sure that basically avoiding failure. Long-term vision is also important here, and this is kind of a follow-up to the planning discussion. We need to get some idea of where we're going with this. It simply doesn't make sense to fret about repairing or upgrading facilities that maybe aren't consistent with the long-term vision of the city. Think about when and how we address these needs. And lastly, balancing is a huge component of this discussion. Simply, we're never going to have enough money. We're never going to have enough people to do everything. How do these assets compete against each other and against other city services? So lastly, we address a few recommendations in the report. I just want to clarify, I didn't realize I was still sitting in the back of the room. These aren't recommended actions by the City Council. These are recommendations for just the city in general to keep in mind. First and foremost, securing funding is critical. Prop J and the replacement of Prop J is super important in this discussion. There is a scenario explained or described in the report where Prop J is not renewed. We do take this hit to general revenues, and we simply cut police and fire services. We have rec centers closed. We have fields that no longer are watered and are browning and dying. But because of the secure funding, we have marvelous streets and sewer systems. Secondary bullet point to that, Prop J or no Prop J, we should always be exploring alternative funding sources for the work we do in general, assets as well. Continue with our condition assessments, regardless of the specific purpose, whether it is to gather data for software systems or just through our normal daily activities. We should be keeping track of the conditions of the assets and communicating that to decision makers and figuring out how to address needs. And lastly, we should commit to continuing to plan for where we want to go on this asset or in this arena. Capital assets is a very slow-moving thing. Some of these assets live for many, many decades. They cost an awful lot of money. They aren't decisions that you take lightly. To support those decisions, a comprehensive master plan is a requirement, and that naturally leads to long-term capital planning. So as I said, this is an informational report. I don't have any specific recommendations that we're asking City Council to take action on at this time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Who would like to ask questions? Go ahead, Steve.
How do you factor in change in technology, for instance, electric vehicles? MTS bus is going to weigh 3,000 to 6,000 pounds more when it's electric versus gas. It's going to wear out the road faster because it's heavier and compressing the asphalt. The vinyl lining in a sewer pipe extends the life of a sewer pipe. How do you factor in technology into some of these formulas?
Well, I have the benefit of being an accountant, and accountants get to look backwards in time instead of having to look forward. A lot of that falls on the shoulders of our planning department or planning group and the community development department. This goes hand in hand with the community's master plan as well as the specific plans that support them. Specifically, the bus scenario, that isn't a 10 years ago problem. You know, that's what I get to look at. It's the 10 years from now problem, and that absolutely is a component that needs to be considered, as are your other examples.
Mainly just a comment. I appreciate the work you've done on this. From my perspective as an elected official and a citizen, I would like to see what are the core, and this is what you're doing, so you were able to inform us better as staff in doing this. What are the core functions of the government? What are the liabilities and assets that we have? And what's the timeline for these assets to fail, or when will they need to be replaced so they don't fail? And so having this report is going to inform us, I'm assuming, better. So when we ask a question, how's our sewer system doing? How's our storm water so we don't get the floods that San Diego did and flood all those people's homes? This is going to better inform us on how to make those decisions of where to delegate money and how quickly things are going to come up. And so this is really the core function of government, is having an understanding of what's going on in your city with regard to its buildings and infrastructure. So thank you for this report, and this is going to be very useful as we move forward in managing. Thank you, Clay.
You're welcome.
I forgot one more comment. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Looking back at the vehicle replacement item that we had earlier, we track the mileage of the vehicles and what type of vehicle, and if it's a trailer, if it's a public works truck, if it's a park and rec truck. And so it's really less about the accounting side of what's the depreciation, is it halfway depreciation? It's how many miles does it have on it? How old is it? And I think that's the important part for the city to manage is what's the state of our assets and how many years do we think we have left? And do we start planning for, in the same way that we do roads, we say, you know what, every blank number of years we're going to surface, slurry thing, and that's the key, is that we're on top of all these asset classes to say, as Councilman Ortiz said, what's the most important one to make sure that we are on top of before it fails? We just had that sewer issue on Graves Avenue, which is probably, 300-400 feet of sewer line to replace, but that was $3.6 million just for that 400 or 500 feet. So if we can avoid that kind of cost per foot thing, that would help.
I like using the vehicle as an analogy because it's real easy to wrap your head around the kind of decisions that take place with a pickup, for example, and most people can't relate to a sewer system, for example. You know, a pickup, we guess it's going to last 5 years, and we guess that it's going to last 100,000 miles. We still need a guy to crawl underneath it periodically and see if the transmission's in good shape or not. And that's basically what we need to do with assets as a whole.
Thank you, Clay, for the report. How I look at it, and I think that the public would probably look at it. So what you've given me here and how I've looked at this is that this is an overall picture of where we stand. If Measure J doesn't go through, we're going to have to make some big changes. It's kind of like in a household. Say we work for a manufacturing company, car manufacturing, and it looks like they're no longer going to make that car. And that plant's going to close. We've got a roof that's got to be fixed, but we also want to get that kitchen remodeled. And we've been saving for that, but now the plant's going to close, and we're going to have to get that roof replaced. And that's kind of how I look at it here. This is everything that we're going to have to do. This is everything that we have to keep our city going. What are we going to do? If Prop J doesn't go through, do we have something in place so that we can start going down a list and say, okay, besides closing down rec centers, besides closing down fire stations?
I think should Prop J not be renewed, I think the city will be faced with making some very, very difficult decisions on what do we keep, what do we abandon. And I don't know any other way of putting that. I know that's not a very specific answer to your question.
No, I know.
But there's some very serious policy implications to those decisions. And I think should we go down that road, I think there will be a considerable amount of time spent debating the various points on how do we get there? How do we get to a point where we can live within our means?
Right, because if it doesn't go through, and I'm hoping that it does because it will solve a lot of problems, but should it not go through, we've got 3 years to get all of our ducks in a row so that when it finally does sunset December 31st of 2028, now we can carry forward our plans and have things in a row. I mean, in 3 more years, the appreciation rate of some of these items are going to be even more so. And I think that we need to look at what is the safety issues like sidewalks in our neighborhoods, street lights. There's still parts in my neighborhood that still need street lights. And I've been complaining about it for over 20 years. And we still need, there are still parts of North Mollison that still need street lights. So these are things that we have to really look at. I'm glad that you've brought it to our attention, and I think the public really needs to look within themselves and decide what are we going to do and how are we going to continue to provide these items for our city with the budget that we have now and the budget that we may have come November, or should I say come December of this year, and in 3 years, how can we help you?
Well, my job gets a whole lot easier when the city has the resources it needs to perform its functions, and I think we're all in the same boat in that regards. And it kind of going back to the recommendations, with the very first one is securing funding is probably number one on that list, whether it's Prop J and its replacement or seeking alternative sources of revenue. Truthfully, that needs to be job one. We've always been, I shouldn't say always, in my history experience here, the city has very diligently gone after efficiencies and tried to do more with less. Mm-hmm. That's very much ingrained in this corporate culture, and it's not going to yield the solution. It'll help, but it won't be the answer. Like, truthfully, revenue, finding alternative sources of revenue is job one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that it? Thanks, Clay. Appreciate it. Angela, do we have any speaker cards for this item?
No speaker card, sir.
All right. Bring it back to the council. We can discuss this some more, where they're looking for a recommendation to accept the report.
What do we need? We need a motion to accept the report?
Unless somebody wanted to discuss it more. Oh, okay, yeah. Then
I'll make that motion. Yeah.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Item 13 is a report regarding the rising 911 call volume from congregate care facilities. City Manager Mitchell will tell us about this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If we get my presentation up, that'd be great. The purpose of this agenda item is really to talk about the impact that 911 calls from congregate care facilities have on our ability to provide public safety. And I'm going to actually start with the recommendation. Usually we conclude with the recommendation, but I'm going to start with that just as a backdrop to the presentation. So my hope today is we're not going to solve the problem, but the council is going to receive a report. Staff's looking for any feedback on the suggestions that we're going to present, and then staff will make a recommendation at the end of the presentation to go out and talk to the operators, the managers of the congregate care facilities in the city, and solicit their feedback and their input. And then once that's done, we'd come back and bring back a comprehensive policy for the city council to consider. So just for some background information, the city has 20 congregate care facilities in the city. That really is composed of licensed skilled nursing facilities or psychiatric care facilities. This does not include non-licensed group homes that are spread throughout their communities that are usually under 8 residents, and it does not include senior living apartments. So these are really more formalized. They have nursing staff on hand. They have other professionals there. So that's who we're talking about, and there happen to be 20 of them in the city of El Cajon. They have a huge demand on our services, though. Last fiscal year, over 2,700 calls were made that the city responded to. It makes up 15% of all the calls that the fire department go to one of these facilities. And we average 7.5 calls per day to one of these sites. In 2022, we actually did a study, and we dove deep into each of the calls and identified that at least about 44% of the calls were what we had called non-emergency calls. So someone was not transported or received critical medical assistance at that time. And what's interesting, of the 20, it really ranged from, we had one facility that 10% of their calls were non-emergency, and that's to be expected. But one of them was up to 69%, and another was at 67%. So we have this range of operators, some of which are relying, frankly, on the city's 911 system as part of their business plan, and others that are not relying on the city as much as the others. Well, we were a bit surprised because we hear this, that there's a lot of calls for lift assists. In this 2-year period, or this 1-year period, there were only 2 lift assists that were required at these places, partly because they do have equipment. Where the lift assists are typically, locations are senior apartment complexes, mobile home parks, or just a random residence. Sometimes as someone's near the end of life, there's a lot of calls for service, and so we'll spend some time there, and then that will correct itself as they go into a more of a skilled nursing facility or they pass away. So back in 2022, and this is not new to the City Council. You guys have been talking about this for several years, and I think our solution at the time was, let's go out. Staff will go talk to these folks. We'll get some their buy-in to reduce these calls. But the reality is, and I'll show you some data, that's not really been effective. One of the challenges that we have in this industry, the turnover in operation staff is dramatic. So we could talk and get buy-in from one operator 1 year, but 6 months later that person will be gone and it'll be a whole other person. So there's a lot of turnover in this industry by the nature of the industry. I have friends in this industry. I know how much turnover occurs. So this graph, and I provided this to you ahead of time just because there's a lot to unpack on this, and this is like PowerPoint 101. Don't do this, but I just wanted to show high level by colors. This shows the number of annual calls per bed. Because it's not fair to, and we do this with motels too. Motel 6 has a lot of rooms. They're always going to have more calls than a motel of 10 rooms, right? And so we've normalized this by looking at annual calls per bed. And you can see that there are some that are really high, well above median. And there's some that are half of what the average or the median call is. So we have again those that are high performers in our mind and those that are high users of our system. We also shared this. This shows the change from 2022 after we went out and did some public education. Only 6 of the facilities in our community decreased in their call volume, while the other 14 increased, where some as much as over 100%. 4 of them are over 100%. So clearly the education route probably is not going to be the long-term solution. So staff looked at what are some ways to rely on the market to help drive some market solutions. So staff is presenting 3 options, and again, these are really just for feedback, conversation, discussion as a starting point, and then we'll kind of take it from there. But we have determined that the average cost to respond to a congregate care facility is $486.83 to be exact. And so one option is we identify what the median call volume is of all 20 congregate care facilities. And if you are 1.25% above that, or really 25% above median, that's really what it means, then you would start paying for every call that's above that threshold at that $486 amount. The option 2, it actually increases the threshold to 1.5 times that of the median. And then the other option is you actually reduce the call volume or the call cost to half of what it really costs us, but you just set it for every call that's over median. Those are covered a couple different models, and if you have questions about how we derive those, we can talk about those a little bit more. But here's how they stack up or compare with each other. So in terms of option 1, it would affect 6 of the facilities in the city. Option 2 would only affect 3. Option 3 would be 10 because there's 10 above median and 10 below median. So it would affect half of the facilities. With option 1, the maximum fee would be $59,000. And then the lowest fee would actually very similar. Options 2 and 3 are very similar, $39,000 annual fee. We also looked at what would be the bed fee or the cost per bed for that facility, and typically the smaller facilities have a higher bed cost, and so for one of the facilities it would be up to almost $2,800 per bed for that fee. So that's pretty significant, and we think that could actually have a market impact. on them. But the average fees, you can see across the board, $21,000 for between the 6. The 3 would experience an average of $29,000, and then for option 3, even though the highest is $39,000 that they would pay, the majority of them are much lower, so the average fee would be about $5,000. So again, staff can answer some questions about those recommendations or those options, but again, we would recommend that we get some feedback from the City Council. Is this the right direction? Is this a wrong direction? And then we're really looking for some feedback from the council or some direction from the council to go out and talk to the congregate care facilities, get their input. They may actually have solutions that we're unaware of, that are easier to manage, that are achieve better outcomes in the long run, that it's not our industry, so we look to them. We have invited them to participate. We sent out an email last week about this agenda item. We gave them the location of the council meeting and also a way to log on and watch this remotely. So we're hoping that many of them are watching so they can be informed and ready to participate with us. So with that, staff's here to answer any questions that you have or receive any feedback you may have.
All right. Before we do that, it's probably a long discussion. I'm going to see if we have any speaker cards on this item.
We have no cards, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so it's let's start with questions. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the report. My question is, what stops the facility from passing those fees on to the patients? And, okay, so that's number one. Mm-hmm. Once those fees, if they were to pass those fees on to the patients, that could impact that patient being able to get a certain standard level of care because maybe, one, they can't afford those fees. A lot of times those facilities are Medicare or they're not paying out of pocket. They're not high-end facilities. They're mostly low-end welfare, not welfare, but Medi-Cal, Medicare type facilities. And so if they are passed on to the patient can't afford it, now that patient would have to move. How can we make sure that the facility is a financial burden on the care facility to keep them from using our 911 system as part of their staff is a good model. I agree. However, I want to make sure that they don't pass those fees to the patient, raise their fees, lower their standard of care to the patient because now they're having to put out more out of pocket. They need to just up their system or maybe just take that fee that they would pay to us and buy cherry pickers or whatever it is to take care of their patients properly. Correct. And those are my two questions.
Can I answer that question? Yeah. So when you accept Medi-Cal and Medicare, you can't pass any fees on to patients at all.
I understand that. However, not everybody's above board.
No, I mean you would go to prison if you did that. I just guarantee you that won't happen. There are so many agencies monitoring these kind of situations. So, I mean, it's. It may not be the right model, but that's not something that's going to happen.
And I'll add, I mean, we have let's say for market rate patients, we have no way to manage or administer costs. It's almost like rent control for congregate care. We have no mechanism to do that. So clearly, if they have a legal ability to pass that along to the patient, that's one option, or the other option is to take it out of their bottom line. I know that these facilities operate on a very thin margin, and they're very competitive. And so what that fee is going to have an impact on who they attract. So I think the intent of the way that we're presenting this is this enough of a fee that will change their behavior? Mm-hmm. Are there things that they can do internally from a management perspective to not call 911? Will they rely on the trained medical staff that they have first before they were to call us? Or do they not grant everybody access to a phone that can call 911? A lot of the 911 calls that come to the city aren't from the facility themselves. They're from people within the facility that are unhappy with the nurse care that they're receiving. And now all of a sudden we're in the position of mitigating the relationship between the congregate care facility and the patient. That's, again, not what we're paid to do.
Right.
So there are some operational things that we think that they could do that they have no incentive to do right now, but the minute they get a bill for $29,000, now all of a sudden they have an incentive to do some of those low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Yeah, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. Initially, I like this idea to drive behavior. My question is, are other cities doing something like this? Have we seen it modeled in different areas?
We have not seen this modeled. I have found probably over a dozen lift assist fees from Tacoma, Washington, to cities in Ohio, to even California cities, where they're charging a lift assist fee. But that doesn't seem to be our challenge, is the lift assist. It's really more of the above and beyond. And that's what I would say. This is not us responding to normal medical calls. This is us responding to those that are abusing the 911 system.
Right.
So we have not discovered anyone that's doing this right now. We'd be on the cutting edge, I think.
But there is a precedent in that there is laws in place or fees in place from a city to congregate care facilities for services rendered, so to speak.
We have found
There is
across the
precedent.
United States that there is that.
Okay, that's good to know. And what was my other question? Oh, for all of these options, it's outlined as $480 some odd dollars per call. Now, is that for every call after they reach that threshold per fiscal year, or every non-emergency call?
That would be every call beyond the threshold, whether it's emergency or non-emergency. And part of the reason we thought about that was actually option 4, is just focus on the non-emergency calls. But the problem is that a call may come in as a non-emergency, but we get there actually is an emergency, or it may come in as an emergency and it actually is a non-emergency. Now all of a sudden I have a poor fire captain that's having to determine, is this an emergency or non-emergency? And so they've been put in a position to make decisions that have financial impacts on the city and also on them. And it's probably a burden that's probably above and beyond what we need to give them.
We shouldn't have to manage, the captain shouldn't have to manage that. So basically what we're doing is we're giving these facilities a bank of calls based off of their bed count. Saying, here's your number of calls based off your bed count per year. Once you go over it, there'll be a fee. And
that's why you have that grace of not, where we presented that grace of not just once you're one call above median, we gave the option of 1.25 or 1.5% or 1.5 times that amount. Then you can go after them, because those are clearly now excessive calls.
Okay. Those are all my questions. I have a lot of comments, but yeah, thank you, Graham.
This question's for the city attorney. The property owners, or let's assume each of the facilities is a property owner. Because if it's not, the property is just going to pass through the tax in a lease. So can a property owner say, hey, this is what our property taxes pay for. There's no measure of how much or less that we use it. That's why we pay property taxes. Can they argue this is an illegal fee? Well, I know they can. What's your thought on whether this is an illegal fee?
I was going to open the, yes, they can say that.
Yeah, I know you're going there.
And that's something that would have to be analyzed. Litigation over fees and charges are becoming more and more prevalent on every type of fee or charge a city invents, and this would be very similar to that. The argument about it would be this is a property-related service type of thing, and that's not what it is. This would be presumably, and the city manager and I have not shared our experience about this, but this would be addressing the actions of the facilities, in other words. And there are other things that we can look at. Medicare has a star rating system, and if patients are unhappy or their family's unhappy, they give them a 0 or a low star, and that hits their pocketbook too, because Medicare does not pay as high a rate of for their patients if they have these low star ratings. Medi-Cal has a similar type of program, I believe, as Medicaid. So the federal government would apply that to the Medicaid system. The vast majority, I would assume, are Medicaid, then Medicare, and then probably the smallest percentage, maybe 10% in my experience of representing some of these facilities is private payers or private insurance. I don't know if the mayor has a similar sort of thought about that.
Yeah, I would think, in rehab facilities, probably some more private pay people who have had strokes, but a skilled nursing facility, very few.
Another question is, this data is blind towards who's responding to the call. In other words, this is not just Heartland Fire. This is the response by whether it's Heartland Fire, San Miguel, Lakeside. The data we're looking at is the whole thing.
Correct. These are calls that were responded to in the city of El Cajon.
So it's blind to who actually serves the call. Okay. Are we able to, let's say the fee is, for some reason, is a problem. But business license fees are different depending on the type of business, aren't they?
They are, but those are voted on by the voters, so it's a tax. A business license fee is actually a tax, so the council could put this on the ballot at some point, and you could tax congregate care facilities.
So the fee that we're talking about is not a tax because it's related to an action?
It's related to a service being provided.
To a service,
okay. It's almost like false alarm calls. So we have the legal ability to charge for a false alarm call.
Like a building.
For a building, it'd be similar to that.
Yep. I agree that you probably can't pass on any fees to the patient because Medi-Cal and Medicare have reimbursement rates. That's all you get for that service. It's your job to manage the costs so that you make a profit out of that. I think this is really good that we're talking about it because for years this has been a problem. And if we go back to that one spreadsheet with all the things on it, some of those guys are really out of line with the amount of calls. 74 calls for 10 beds. That's I don't understand why they would need. I would need more information. Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Just for anecdotal clarification, Peggy, my friend Peggy is a nurse manager from a University Community Medical Center, so I'm guessing she'll agree with me. When I worked at an emergency room doing psychiatric evaluations, every Friday night we would get 7 to 10 admissions from the nursing home every Friday night. And, most of them were inappropriate. And we found that because of the staffing problems that they had on the weekends, that they would ship them off to the hospital and just use that as a solution to their staffing problems. We also found out that the way Medi-Cal works and Medicare works is you get a certain reimbursement rate up until a number of days. I can't remember what that number of days was, like 30 days. And then if they weren't readmitted to the hospital within that 30-day period of time, that rate of reimbursement went down by about 60%. So what do you think happened to every Medicare patient that was coming up on 27, 28 days? Suddenly they'd have some kind of crisis that they had to go to the hospital. And I would see these patients when they came in. I said, "Why are you here?" They said, "I have no idea. I was sitting in bed. They came in with the ambulance and said, 'You got to go.'" And so this is an endemic problem with this institute. I think you're doing a service to not just our citizens, but to all the hospitals and probably the patients themselves who are wrongly rousted out of their beds and taken into facilities. And we'll figure out the way to do it. But I'm very encouraged that we're talking about doing this. Okay, so
with that, Council, I'm looking for some direction and giving me authority to go out and talk to the congregate care operators.
I kind of want to brainstorm the way to do this.
Well, yeah, and if I may, I think it's important for the public to realize that we're extremely sensitive of the optics that this presents, in that if you call 911, we're going to start charging you. We want to be very sensitive that we're keenly aware of that. And I think our fire staff is completely above board in making assessments of what is emergency versus what is non-emergency. They're an ISO Class 1 fire department, and they're one of the best in the nation. Only 1% of fire departments can reach that certain level. So I want the public to realize that we're not just coming down on people who need help. That's not what's happening, as the mayor said. But I agree. I don't believe that we should be supporting an organization's business plan on the backs of El Cajon citizens' taxpayer dollars. That's wrong. We should not be involved in corporate welfare, helping people increase or keep their bottom line, and that's exactly what's happening. And just as the mayor said, I ran calls as a EMT. My wife has worked in congregate care facilities, skilled nursing facilities, and we've had calls where residents would request certain EMTs and firefighters because they were attractive, and it's bad.
That big problem for you?
No, it was not. But it's bad. The amount of abuse is awful.
It is.
And it's obvious that it's possible for these congregate care facilities to run a facility in an organized fashion in El Cajon. If you could go back, Mr. City Manager, to the green and red, not that, yep, that one. It looks like half of our facilities are doing it. Half of our facilities in El Cajon can manage their organization and their facility in a responsible way without relying on our fire department to increase staff. Half of them aren't. And so we've tried the carrot in an educational way to say, hey, this is a problem. Can you fix it? This has not happened. And so the next part of it is the stick. And unfortunately, I don't like doing this, but they've left us no choice than to take other measures. And so I'm in complete support of some kind of a fee per call once they hit that threshold. I want to make sure I get all. Oh, and the problem's only going to increase. These facilities are already there's already a wait list. There's going to be more of these facilities increasing as baby boomer generation increases into needing to use these facilities. So it's not going to get any better. And so I think we need to nip this in the bud now and set a standard in our city saying you're not going to exploit our citizens, especially when our firefighters are already overworked. We're increasing in population. So I would like, Graham, you to engage our facilities and say, listen, the council is resolved. Everyone hasn't spoke, but it seems like the council is resolved in creating a fee. It's going to happen. Do you have any other suggestions? They're willing to hear you out if you have any other suggestions on how to curb these excessive calls. Whether they create their own association and shared practices, best practices, better management, better staffing, whatever it is. But it's long overdue for us to step in here as a city.
One question I forgot to ask. About a year ago, we did the motel thing where we said you get one call per bed per year, and if you exceed that, then there's some consequences. Have we seen any complaints about, well, this person got hurt, but we would have called 911, but we didn't want to, hit that mark. So have we seen any problems related to holding motels to a standard?
Whether that's happening or not, I don't know, but we haven't received complaints about that.
Okay. So let's go to the page that has the three options that cost money. And let's go back to, there's a chart. Yeah, there. Okay, so in any scenario, the maximum fee is $60,000 under the current rules, which Doesn't sound like a lot. I don't know what their operating margins are, but 59,000 is 59,000.
This was one with 120 beds, so you can do the math. 120 or 60 divided by 120 that you can give you a bed.
Yeah. So where I'm going with this is I actually like to get a little tougher. And my suggestion, and I'll just toss out for discussion, is a 1.0 times the 1.35 median. There's no reason to have a multiplier of the 1.35. That's what your options, the first two options are a multiplier of the median of 1.35. I would say no multiplier. You're going to be held to 1.35. And here's why I like the 1.35. Because the motels are 1.0 calls. And this is 1.35 calls. I anticipate that a congregational care should get a little more allowance than a motel because of the nature of their business. So that's why I'm okay with the 1.35 versus 1.0 that the motels have. So in that sense, I would hold the standard to 1.35 as the median and use that for above or below. That number could be revisited each year. That number could go down if everybody's doing great, which is what we want. It could go up if it's not working. And if we start with these fees, and I agree with the $486 fee whole, I'd say, you know what, the total looks like it's not enough to change behavior. I guess that's where I'm going with. And if we start here and we don't get the change in behavior, we can change the fee. We can change the metric. But for the first year, and I'd say go talk to these guys and say, you know what? Any call above 1.35 per bed is going to cost you $486. And if after the end of the year we're finding out you don't care, you're just going to absorb it, and we don't see a change, we'll just come back and we'll revisit the whole process. That's my volley.
Yeah, Michelle.
These calls are mostly lift assist.
No, there's only two. This last year we only had 2 lift assists, so there's almost no lift assists.
So what type of calls are they? They're just
Random, just some medical calls, some not medical calls, some.
Okay.
There's
I've
a
been
variety
on
of
those.
calls.
Okay. I was just going to say, if they were lift assist, then it's like, okay, send them out the brochures, get a salesman out there, for cherry pickers, and say, okay, let's have a little seminar and try and sell them on the thing. I don't know, but if that's not the case.
This activity initially was creating a lift assist program. That's why I know so much about lift assist ordinances around the country. But then when we did the analysis and realized we only had 2, that makes no sense to have a lift assist program that would only impact 2. So.
Right. No, I get it. No, I think this is good. And, you got to hurt them in their pocket. I've worked these care facilities back in the day when, we had a ton of patients. I've been an EMT and I've worked in the ERs. So, I get it and I understand it, and we've got to do something because we can't be their ambulance service all the time, and we can't just, be there. So do what you got to do. I hate to see private pay patients get stuck with the extra bills because I know that's what they're going to do. Some of these guys are just not above board. If they're a private patient, they're just not above board. But it is what it is. So thank you.
So any feedback on Mr. Goebel's suggestion of just setting it at the median, which is 1.35, and any call above that would receive the $480-something fee?
I don't see any big issues with that. I'd like to revisit not just the call volume, but the cost to the city as well. I would assume that's going to, the $483 per call, I would assume that's going to go up year over year as well, right?
Yeah, that right now that reflects the amount of time for a captain, an engineer, a firefighter, wear and tear on the vehicle, the actual call to 911. There's a fee that we get charged from Heartland, and then an admin fee on top of that. So that's how you come up to the 486. So that would have to change every year as our prices change.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. I'd be inclined to get their attention somehow, since the carrot hasn't worked. I think we've done our due diligence for 2 years, attempting to contact them and provide that grace period, and we're doing it again by you engaging them and saying, do you have any feedback? Would you like an alternative way? Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement. Go ahead, Michelle.
Right. One thing that just kind of popped in my head: for a private citizen, the average citizen doesn't have any medical background. I mean, they can put on a Band-Aid, they can put some Neosporin on it, and that's good. And I can understand calling 911, for it may not be necessarily an emergency. They fell, they may have cracked some ribs or whatever, and I understand that. But in these care facilities, you've got at least an MA, you've got an LVN, and generally at least 1 or 2 RNs running around. To call our 911 services and to call our guys to go out there is a waste of our time and our services and our assets to come in when they've already got the medical staff there to do it. I mean, we're not talking just putting a Band-Aid on there. And I think, I know this is kind of late in the talk, but it just sort of popped into my head. It's like, they need to do their job. This is what they have the medical sources there to do more than just a Band-Aid.
Sorry, are you done? Yeah.
I'm done.
I would also say, maybe throw it out there. If we get to a situation where, there's facilities that want to petition to say this actually was an emergency.
I was just thinking of the same thing.
Yeah, and so they go over their threshold by, 50 calls a year or something like that, and they're something along those lines. Would that be too much staff time to say, all right, here's our 70 calls, and we got charged however many over the threshold? The facility would then come to us and say, listen, can we get a little bit off our bill because these were actually emergencies? We should wrap our head around that situation if they come to us with that scenario.
We could build into the process an appeal process, right?
Yeah.
You have to assume almost everyone will appeal because the cost to appeal is almost nothing. So
Yeah.
it's easy to do that.
Yeah.
And then they could eventually appeal it to the city council. That would be the mechanism I would recommend if they didn't like staff's analysis.
Sure.
I mean, the ultimate and the ultimate tool that you have is most of these operate with a conditional use permit. You could almost do a deemed approved concept that if you have a certain amount, you trigger a CUP. But the challenge with that is for each, and we do this with motels, for every time we go to the planning commission, it's thousands of dollars of staff analysis.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if the goal is to reduce costs, we're probably spending more on that mechanism
Yep.
by the CUP analysis. So from a market sense, there's no ROI for us.
Right.
So
the other side of this is, avocado care, it is one of the worst facilities in the nation. I mean, they've gotten national news about some of the poor, downright abuse that's occurring there. And so I think we need to keep in mind the players in this game, and there's been news articles. KPBS wrote, 60 minutes on a story on some of these facilities. So we're jumping into another side of this, but it's the level of care at some of these facilities is awful. I'm really surprised that they haven't been shut down by the state or the feds.
And to Ms. Mitchell's comment about average residents is calling, the average resident is not calling 324 times, right? Like the one that you just mentioned is.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference.
Yeah.
Could we go back to that table that has the green and it's the 50-50 there? let's look at the one at the bottom, 15 beds, made 9 calls. And the one at the top, a low number of beds, 10 beds, 74 calls.
There you go.
And you know who's paying for this? The taxpayer. We're not charging a fee because we like to charge fees. We're trying to change behavior because their business plan is on the back of the taxpayers. And that's not fair. And that's what we're trying to change.
Just to reiterate a point, there's more cost to this than just those hard costs. That means every firefighter, every paramedic has to suit up, drive down there for a call that could have been handled in-house. Then it gets transferred to an emergency room, which clogs up your emergency room. Right. Costs $20,000, $30,000 in tests. And then, it just goes on and on from there. It is a behavior that should be available to anybody who needs it if it's warranted. But if it's being abused, it should not, and we're probably the only entity that can actually put restrictions on it. So I think you need any more information?
This is extremely helpful. This gives us enough firepower to go out and have a conversation.
Great. Thank you very much. Item 14 is an annual review of automated license plate reader programs. Staff will tell us about this, and our chief is coming up, so he will tell us about this. Hi, Chief.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Well, he gets the PowerPoint loaded up. Are you still a student with BALA? You should get extra credit. You're the last one here.
Yeah.
You got a phone? You want a selfie up here? Get extra credit?
Come on up.
Do you mind?
Yeah,
Do you mind?
it's okay.
You just have to press the arrow buttons now.
Here, can you videotape me?
Oh yeah, of course.
Videotape me right now. This student's the only one who stayed to the very end of the council meeting. He should get extra credit.
All right. Well, now that we got that out of the way,
Good
so
idea.
this will be
Good
our
idea, Chief.
What's that?
That was a good idea, Chief.
Thank you.
Although I'm worried that he's wearing pajamas, I think he's in here for the long haul, right?
Thanks for staying. Congratulations, you're here for the most exciting presentation. So this is our first annual review of our automated license plate reading system. As you know, we started our flock system in August of last year with the installation of 40 fixed cameras. In 1 year's time, this was the impact. 151 arrests, 128 vehicles recovered, which had a value of over $1.2 million, 5 illegal firearms seized, significant seizures of fentanyl and methamphetamine, and it's been instrumental in helping solve a number of big cases, which I'll go into a little bit more in a second, including a double homicide of 2 teenagers we had earlier last year. So these are just some of the success stories. These are headlines taken straight from the news. One of our higher visible ones was that U-Haul truck that you see. That was, as you remember, that was the active shooter situation, homicide we had on North Magnolia at the dentist office. We got that picture right away from our flock system. We posted that on our social media feeds. The news picked it up and started posting it, and we were able to locate the suspect because of that photograph. A citizen in San Diego saw this on the news, found the car in San Diego and called San Diego PD, and that's how we were able to track that person down so rapidly. So huge success from the system. So I want to tell you about a recent enhancement we did. We added one CCTV camera that we can point, tilt, and zoom. It's called a Condor camera. It was put at the intersection of Marshall and Vernon, and it was put there Marshall and Arnell. And it was put there specifically for complaints that we've received, criminal complaints, from business owners in the area about criminal activity in and around the trolley platform there. So that is a new addition just recently. We're hoping it has impact in that area to reduce the crime problems that they're having in and around that area. So this is an actual picture of the dashboard that the officers pull up. Those dots are where the cameras are at, and that video picture is the actual screenshot from that new camera. So moving forward, We know that there's gaps in our coverage, and without getting into specific cases to damage the integrity of those cases, we know that we've had significant cases where if we would have had better coverage with our system, it would have been a significant factor in solving those crimes. So moving forward, we want to add coverage. We want to potentially add more cameras to the system. As you know, this first year was a 1-year pilot or a 3-year pilot, but has showed significant success, obviously. So we are going to explore potentially using some cost savings of some vacant officer positions and potentially reprogramming that money to enhance the system as it is today. And with that, this is an informational item, and we will take any feedback or questions.
Let me check first to see if there's any public comment on this.
We have no comment, sir.
Okay. Questions for the chief?
Does the professional medical supply people know about the capability of the new camera, that you're enhancing service there?
I don't know if we have notified them, but we certainly will.
I think that'd be a great idea. Yeah. They're hanging in there.
Yeah, yeah. The cameras are very effective too.
Chief, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I've got comments.
Oh, no, I think you were done.
Oh, no. This is great. We got to spend a little bit of time on this. So $114,000 was the cost for a year's worth of service, according to the staff report. And we recovered $1.2 million worth of stolen cars. That's $890 per recovery. That's a pretty good value. Put otherwise, $114,000 to recover 128 stolen vehicles. It's an ROI of 1,053%. You know, we're happy in life if we get 8%, on our investments in our 401k or whatever it is. And this is 1,053% to recover that much money for that investment. So that's significant. But also, what we haven't been able to measure is the cost of crimes avoided or prevented, because stolen cars lead to other crimes. You're going to rob somebody, you're going to hurt somebody, crimes against property people, and so that's an incalculable cost. I think the city manager even had a thought about insurance.
As Mr. Goebel and I were talking about this, I mean, clearly when we recover a vehicle, the owner of the vehicle is excited, but the reality is if that vehicle is never recovered and that person files an insurance claim, that means there's less insurance being paid out, which frankly affects our insurance rates because we all pay into those stolen vehicles. So there's some real societal savings because of this program. Granted, we're not going to solve all of society's costs, but if more cities did this, I think we'd have a bigger impact.
It's a very cost-effective force multiplier for you, and it makes sense to use vacant position funding because this is as good as an officer who would be doing a similar kind of work tracking stolen vehicles. So for that reason, it makes sense to fund it through that mechanism. It's great work. The public should be very happy with the results.
I couldn't agree more. I would say it's a very economical solution. As you stated earlier, a fully funded, fully benefited police officer position would buy about 40 or 50 cameras. So I think one could easily argue that although our officers obviously make tremendous impact out in the community, that's one officer for 40 hours a week. With that money that's not being used, if I can reprogram that into a system where I get 24-hour coverage, 365 days a week, with additional 40 or 50 cameras. So I think one can easily argue that that's an economical solution.
And it's really the extended cost of avoided crimes. Who knows what people would have been hurt, what property would have been damaged, had these 151 arrests not been made. It's a brilliant product and use.
Absolutely.
Just one quick question. One of the concerns that we presented when we first brought this up, or that I presented, was the storing of data of people's license plate and personal property. There hasn't been any breach of personal data or any misuse of it since we've been here. Has there been?
No, not that we're aware of.
Awesome. And then the other one was the types of crimes we are pursuing in using this system. So one of the concerns was, are we going to start taking pictures of people's license plates for expired registration? As far as I'm concerned, we're still, or as far as my understanding is we're still using it for felony crimes, and then I think Amber Alerts was the other one. Is that right? Or
Yeah, so Amber Alerts, Silver Alerts, missing people alerts, and felony vehicles and stolen vehicles.
And
That's
stolen
correct.
vehicles. So those are the three crimes, and those are still more than enough to keep our officers busy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can't. But when we take a picture of the plate, we can't tell that the registration's expired or not.
Right. Okay. That's all I need to know. Thanks, Chief.
Any more questions or comments? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Item 14 is an annual review of, oh, we just did that. Sorry about that. Item 15 is the 2024 annual pension status report. Staff will share with us about this.
Good afternoon again.
Morning, Clay.
Happy again to be here to present the annual pension status report. Our pension funding policy requires that staff prepare an annual pension review and present a summary of each plan's funding status with new amortization levels to the City Council in a public meeting and discuss recommended actions and or budget adjustments. This chart, I think we're all pretty familiar with by now. 20-year history of CalPERS investment returns. This is frequently what drives the conversation. This year is no different. However, it's not good news or bad news. It's kind of ho-hum news. After a couple of roller coaster years in 21 and 22, where CalPERS had tremendously high investment returns followed by tremendously bad investment returns, last year, kind of mediocre news, 5.8%, which is below the target of 6.8%. So that does come with a price tag, but it is not catastrophic losses like the year before. We do not have detailed in this yet, but you are likely to see newspaper headlines with CalPERS returns for 2024. CalPERS is reporting investment returns, preliminary returns of 9.3% last year, which is very, very good news. However, I'm a little reluctant to go in too much detail about the impacts of that. Those returns triggers a policy that will cause CalPERS to reevaluate changes in the discount rate. So we might not be in a situation where by the time we're having this conversation next year to fully see the benefits of those returns. So this is a screen with an awful lot of numbers. I won't read them all to you, but I will tell you what they are. One column is the total liability, pension liability, and the changes from year to year, and the assets we have set aside to pay for those. The difference between those is the unfunded liability. That is the shortfall in the money we have set aside to pay future benefits. The one thing I do want to point out on this slide, however, is the change between the 2022 valuation and the 23 valuations were fairly minimal at about $2 million. That is an awful lot of money, but given the scale of the numbers we discussed here, that is a fairly flat proposition. And you can also see the same thing in the funding status. We improved from 82.6% funded to 82.9% between the 2 years. it's important when we're on the subject that we don't just look at the unfunded CalPERS liability. We also need to keep in mind that we still have outstanding pension obligation bond principal. As of June 30th, 2023, that POB principal is just shy of $137 million. That, in combination with the CalPERS unfunded liability, leaves us with a total of approximately $254 million of unfunded pension-related debt. This year's valuation included the addition of 4 new amortization levels. I think I want to reevaluate how we present this information in the future, because this shows the new stuff that CalPERS is piling on to the old stuff. And by policy, we need to discuss this a little bit, but it doesn't show the reductions that we're seeing through the additional payments we're making and things like that. So this really is only telling part of the story. In all, we see an impact of about $5 million in the unfunded liability. Well, the majority of it is tied to investment returns. This slide presents the impact for both plans of on normal cost and the amortization of the unfunded liability. I want to point out specifically that the normal cost does decrease incrementally from year to year. We've been waiting an awfully long time to see that, and that is the impact, largely the impact of more and more employees moving towards PEPRA from the classic plans. However, we do notice the UAL payments are increasing year to year, but I do want to remind you of, going back to the very first slide of the we showed with the investment returns, that swing between the really good year and the really bad year created a pocket where the unfunded liability pretty much went away, and we were taking advantage of that pocket to fund additional contributions to CalPERS. So if you consider that and kind of treated that as if it was a steady state situation, the UAL contributions are fairly steady. Part of the pension funding policy requires that we discuss the allocation of additional resources. This is something that is always a good idea. However, given the uncertainty of the investment returns of 2024, I think it's a little bit early to have that discussion. However, we still have one more year of additional contributions that followed as part of that plan to fill the swing in the 2 years. I haven't come up with a catchy way to refer to that. Because of that uncertainty, and we do have a plan in the works at the time, we are not recommending any actions at this time. This is a topic we regularly revisit at both the 5-year business plan update and the preparation of the subsequent year's annual budget. However, in addition to that, we will again be here in the fall of 2025 with next year's update. So with that, I conclude my presentation and would be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Clay. Appreciate that. Questions? Okay. Speaker cards on this item?
No speaker cards, sir.
Discussion. All right. Thank you, Clay.
You're welcome.
The last administrative report, item 16, is a report on an always stop sign request on Greenfield Drive at Souvenir Drive. Staff will tell us about this.
Click extend here. Should be good.
right. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. This item is a request for an always stop at the intersection of Greenfield Drive and Souvenir Drive. In Souvenir Drive, where it intersects Greenfield Avenue or Greenfield Drive, is a T intersection, and it's of the easterly part of El Cajon. I-8 is on the east part of it. Greenfield Middle School is to the west. And this request came in as to investigate the need for an always stop, and the concern was the overall safety at this location. This is a photo of the location, the intersection. We're looking east as you approach the crest of the hill at Greenfield Drive, right at Souvenir. And the posted speed on Greenfield Drive is 35 miles per hour. And then staff collected data at the intersection and determined that approximately 9,800 vehicles travel through this intersection, with 7,890 vehicles per day on Greenfield Drive and another 1,900 plus vehicles on Souvenir Drive. We also looked at the accident records for the past 5 years, and we found that there were 3 accidents that have occurred. And drilled down through more of the accident records, and all these were attributed to unsafe speed. And we also looked at the intersection sight distance. As you're turning left, or you're trying to get onto Greenfield Drive from Souvenir Drive, we measured the actual sight distance to the left, and it's limited to 300 feet, and the desired minimum distance of 385 feet is required. So it kind of falls short on the intersection sight distance. So what we do in the engineering department, we take a look at, we have a warrant study that we follow. And it basically follows the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And we use a point system that was developed many years ago by the city of San Diego. And typically a minimum of 30 points out of 50 points is desirable to warrant the installation of an always stop. The warrants factor in accident history, special conditions like limited sight distance, and traffic and pedestrian volumes. So the data collected revealed that 30 points were tallied at this intersection. Therefore, staff is recommending for the installation of an always stop sign on Greenfield Drive. I failed to mention there's an existing stop sign on Souvenir Drive. So with that, staff is recommending that the City Council adopts the resolution approving the installation of permanent always stop signs on Greenfield Drive at the intersection of Souvenir Drive, and I'll open that up to questions.
Questions? Steve?
Have you considered the impact of traffic backing up with the stop sign? Because it's just not that far from Main Street, and your data shows that the peak number of cars is between 3 and 5 p.m. And I know that because of the light cycle at Greenfield and Main, because it's tied to the Caltrans signal to get on, very few cars can get through per cycle. So it takes you 2 to 3 cycles to get through. Do you think the stop sign will have an impact on? We
will take a look and see how the queuing is, but typically the stop signs queuing goes quicker, unless it's a special event letting out. But vehicles usually take 2 to 3 seconds to stop, and then back to accelerate back to up to speed again. So it's difficult to say how, but that distance between that intersection or the signalized intersection, I think it's sufficient. But if there's an issue, we'll have to take a look at that.
Okay. And I think at Camillo Way, you're putting in a temporary stop sign just to observe for things just like that, aren't you?
Yes, and the permanent stop sign will probably be installed after we get a contractor on board closer to the end of the year.
Now, because you can't see more than 300 feet from Souvenir up to the crest of Greenfield, that means somebody coming from East Main up Greenfield at a rate of speed only has 300 feet before they go over that they have to stop. What are your plans to let people know on the other side of this crest there's a stop sign?
This slide shows that we would install a stop ahead flashing signs. So those would be installed at least a minimum 300 feet away from the intersection. And when we look at the MUTCD to space those actual signs to give you enough stopping sight distance for a vehicle to stop safely.
That's going to be
and the
important.
flashing signs will help.
That's going to be important because it's a raceway up the hill, and if you don't have enough warning, as soon as they crest, they're going to skid. And by the way, your accident count doesn't include 2 crashes into a house at the next street over, Clark Court, which happened most recently about 2 years ago, which was a fatality. Might have been due to intoxicated driving, which stop sign is not going to help, but nonetheless, every little bit of flashing light to say there's a stop sign helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Mario. Any speaker cards on this item?
We do, sir. We have one from Alan Nordal.
Hello, sir. I'm good. How are you?
That count of 1910, I'm one of those because I live on Lilly, which is 2 streets up. And I encourage you to consider this proposal. We have middle school students that go up and down that street, and I think safety is job one of the government, right? We'd all agree with that? And this is a public safety thing. I mean, that Greenfield, for those of you who may or may not be familiar, is a cut-through. People use that as a cut-through to go from off the 8 and around into El Cajon itself. So I applaud the PE group for putting this proposal together, and I think you're right, Steve. I think we need to have some flashing signs, or I was thinking rumble strips or something because it is a blind hill. There's no question about that. And so I stand in support of my residents that are around me who would agree with this. And I think it's the most cost effective, frankly. I mean, you could build a ramp that goes up and around so people can walk up and around, but that doesn't solve the problem of speeding cars. And that's what I think is largely responsible for the accidents that occurred. And again, Steve, somebody who's drunk, and they should never be driving, right? We all think that's true. But if they had to stop, I don't think they could get the speed. I'm not a physicist, but I play one on TV. They couldn't get the speed to wreck into those houses. And I think, and my father-in-law who passed away, is in the house right next to where you're going to put the stop sign up. So I like the idea that you've got it in such a way that it would, support that. And as it relates to the traffic congestion, I think you're exactly right. There's enough distance between Maine and where this is, where people that shouldn't be an issue. But you might have the data. That's all I wanted to speak to the council about. I'm really supportive of this idea.
Thanks very much. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you for coming. I'm one of your neighbors. If you know where Trace Lomas is, that's my corner.
Yep.
So this is also very impactful to our neighbors as well.
Yeah.
I think the proof is in the data. When he says there's 30 points out of 50, we would be negligent if we say there's enough points to justify this. If we were to turn this down, in my opinion, how could we justify that? And if something bad happened, it would not be good. So you're right. We have to keep people safe.
Thank you for your time.
I also want to recognize you, sir, for thanking you for participating in our Measure J town hall. You're one of our participants. I think we recognized a handful of them at one of the meetings. Were you there to be recognized?
Yes, I do. I applaud the council's effort, and Graham, yours too, and the people that were here. That was a good meeting. A lot of dynamics, right?
Yeah.
You have some hard decisions if Measure J doesn't pass, and I don't know what the count is right now.
Just wanted to thank you for being involved in that, and then this as well. We appreciate your feedback.
No problem. And again, thank you for your time.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. Somebody like to make a motion?
Move adoption.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Okay. There are no commissioner reports on today's agenda. Item 17 is my activities report. We're at the activities report of council members. Councilmember Goebel.
As reported.
Kendrick is not here. Michelle Mitchell.
As reported with a couple of added, last Thursday I went to a Funders Together meeting regarding homelessness, and that was a really good meeting. I also attended the Judiciary Committee meeting with Congressman Darrell Issa, and that was very enlightening. I also want to bring two things, kind of two announcements. This Friday is the Alley Catwalk over here on Reyes Street. So for any residents who want to do something this Friday from 4 to 8, we have the Alley Catwalk. And then on Hillsdale, it's not in El Cajon, but it's the Chaldean Festival at Hillsdale Middle School from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. It's $5 fee to get in. All kinds of things are going to be there, food and dancing and arts and crafts. So if you want to get a little bit of culture in, that's on Saturday and Sunday. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you so much. And Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
As reported with a couple of changes, I did not attend the September 5th event at Meridian Baptist. And in addition, today attended the East County Economic Development Council Gillespie Field Committee meeting. And I also was at the what was the thing you went to? We went to in Santee with Darrell Issa.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, I was there, but what was it called? To the Judiciary Committee. Yes, I was there as well. And one comment very quickly for the public, please make sure you know that the 8 East is going to be completely closed from Friday at 9 p.m. to Monday at 5 a.m. from about the Severin and Fuerte exit to the interchange of the 67, so just past that bridge. There's information on Caltrans for detours, but I'd imagine that our city is going to be completely packed with bypasses and people on surface streets trying to get around on the weekend. So just give yourself some time to get around from this Friday to Monday.
Thanks for warning us about that. All right, there are no joint council member reports and no general information items on today's agenda. And item 22 has been pulled. There are no second readings of ordinance on today's agenda. And that brings us to closed session. Our city attorney will recite the title and lead us into the closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council is going into closed session on one item, a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraph 2 of subdivision D of Government Code section 54956.9. There's one potential case. The description is on August 9, 2024, the Attorney General for the State of California through Chief Deputy Attorney General Venus D. Johnson notified Police Chief Mike Moulton of its belief that the El Cajon Police Department maintains a practice of sharing information captured by its automated license plate recognition system without a state and or federal law enforcement agencies in violation of state laws, that is California Code, Civil Code section 1798.90.55B. It's the wrong number, but it's 1798 in the Civil Code.
Thank you. Make a motion then to adjourn to closed session.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back to conclude the meeting as soon as we're finished with closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, we have returned from closed session, and I will ask our city attorney to report on actions taken in closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council met in closed session on an item of potential litigation, significant exposure as described previously, and no action was taken. in that matter.
This brings us to the adjournment of the regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, El Cajon Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, held this 10th day of September 2024, which is now adjourned till tonight, Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you.